Hello, hello, sweet souls, and welcome back to another episode of It's All Happening. I am both extremely humbled, excited, and nervous to have this conversation today, which isn't common. It doesn't really happen for me. I pride myself on being an eloquent speaker and thinker and kind of always having my thoughts and wits about me. But this is a conversation that is really nuanced. There's a lot of darkness, but also a lot of beauty and wisdom and resiliency and medicine that gets to come out the other side. And for those of you who are familiar with my show or familiar with my story, have been following me for a while, you know, it might be 5-6 episodes back now that I expressed my experience over the past couple of years with navigating a once completely repressed memory of sexual trauma. And this is a really real thing that happens more often than you're probably hearing inside of the spiritual healing space. I think it's a reason why a lot of people have such resistance to the depths of darkness that these sorts of spaces and this type of healing can take you into. And I'm just so honored to have a sister on the path who I met years before my own awakening around it, but also somebody who I believe was put on my path as a catalyst for me to be able to see my story and begin healing what happened to me. So without further ado, welcoming onto the podcast today, Kore Schmeeckle. She is a vocalist, a beautiful musical artist, a healer, a mother, and a survivor of sexual assault. And that is what it is that we are going to be talking about today. So just placing that trigger warning here, wanting to invite you to navigate this conversation when you have the spaciousness to actually do so, really checking in with yourself to see where is your heart, where is your body, where's your nervous system at today. And this will live here. It's not going anywhere. So if this isn't the moment for you to listen to this conversation, do so with a sense of self-responsibility. Yeah. Kore, thank you for being here. Oh, it's almost like where do we begin? I guess I want to express a little bit about sort of the ways in which I don't even think I've expressed this to you. I know we had like a short period of contact after my memory came up because you were the first person that I was like, she's the only person in the world I know that can potentially understand what it is that I'm navigating right now. But Kore and I met in my ayahuasca retreat, my one and only experience inside of ayahuasca. And she had purposely come for an intention of healing a repressed memory that she had remembered. And I remember feeling so moved by your story and so touched by your strength and your resiliency and like what it was that you were navigating. And simultaneously, inside of my own experience, there was this really interesting connection for me. As we know, like women who come into ceremony together, it's not random, it's very synchronistic. Everybody has medicine for one another. And for me, your place inside of that circle, I believe, began activating for me the reality of what I had no idea was inside of me, because I didn't only feel like touched and in awe of you, that was absolutely there, but I also felt very like activated and like, oh my God, I'm so afraid that like her story is also my story, which is where my story with it began, but I didn't even realize it was beginning.
So much shame and grief and rage around. And so yeah, that moment was a defining moment in my life to share that and to be received in that, and to hear the impact that it had on you beyond like the gratitude of my courage means so much to me, because that's why I do share. I share for my own healing, and I share now even more so to help women, and just humans in general who have these repressed memories that can feel so confusing, and to show them that they're not alone.
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece. And the deeper that you go on this path and stepping into claiming, like, I want to be somebody who facilitates these healing spaces, the deeper you go, the more you realize that, like, what you're sharing and what you're navigating inside of these spaces with other people, it's always for the entirety of not even the group, but the collective, right? And yeah, as we share, we get to heal, but it's also such sweet medicine for the people who need to hear it and who need to have stories that resonate with their own and need to be connected with people who have been through experiences like their own. And I believe that the recollection of the repressed memory of childhood sexual trauma or any sexual trauma is a really particular flavor of that experience, because you're not only navigating the trauma inside of your body and what's happening with the PTSD responses and the fear that you're navigating and the emotions that you're navigating and the pain that comes up in the body, but you're also navigating this fight with your consciousness of, like, what is real and what isn't, and where did this come from and how did this happen, and trying to piece together the reality of a memory that your body knows, right, and is telling you the truth about, but that your mind has worked so hard to keep so separate from the rest of your consciousness. And I just, yeah, I can't help but to feel like those of us who have gone through it, the more we speak about it, the more we normalize it, the more spaciousness there is for people to find the people they need to feel validated and seen and connected to, and also to receive the perspectives of those who have been on a path of healing with it, of like, hey, this is what really helped for me, or hey, like, yeah, it is really confusing and that's a really normal part of the experience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's so much more common than people realize. Like you said at the beginning of the podcast, like it's not talked about very often, not only in the spiritual community, but just worldwide. It's just not something that people have either the willingness or the awareness to be able to speak on. And I feel really honored to be able to lead the way with you.
Yeah. Thank you. So, as much as you feel comfortable in expressing, maybe just giving the listeners a little bit of your background and your story.
Yeah. So, I am 33, and 4 years ago, during my Saturn return when I was 29, I experienced a trigger. And that's something that I feel is worth sharing more about too, is like the moment that we're triggered into the remembering is like divinely perfect. And this is not a process that can or should be rushed. And so, whatever phase of the process you guys might be in as you're listening to this, just know that it's exactly perfect and it's being divinely orchestrated in a way that will allow you to navigate it with the most grace and the most ease that you possibly can. So, when I was 29, I was triggered into my own remembering, and I've been intentionally healing over the course of the past 4 years. I was sexually assaulted by my father, and I had no recollection of it until I was 29. It was completely repressed. And the more that I began to unravel the layers of protection around this remembering, the more I began to understand it wasn't just my father. And this actually isn't something that we have really caught up on since. But I just the past few years have uncovered more layers and recognized that I was actually involved in sex trafficking. And so that has been what I have been moving through and coming to terms with and grieving around and processing my anger and my confusion around. And for me, there's so many layers to healing this type of trauma, no matter what the circumstance is. In a situation like mine, there was an additional layer, which was drugs were involved. And so that has added like a layer of complexity as well to the understanding and the remembering, because it's already such like a disorienting experience, and then adding that on top of it creates even more disorientation. So I just want to presence like a lot of compassion for anyone who might be resonating with my experience, and anyone who's resonating with like any part of my experience, even if it is not exactly the same. So yeah, that has been the remembering that I've been coming to terms with. And through that process, my entire life completely unraveled and has been rebuilt, and brought me into deeper connection with the things that now I teach and help women with reclaiming, which is, first of all, empowerment, helping people recognize like how specifically sexual trauma disempowers us, because it's a very complex, deep, like layered effect that it has on our ability to be in our bodies and to be in our power. And so I help women not only reclaim their power, but reconnect to their voice. And not to say like it's not just women who are affected by this, but just me as a woman, I'm speaking from that perspective. The womb, or just the sacral center itself, is so directly connected to the throat, and the sacral and our throat are our centers of self-expression. And so me as a vocalist, that's been a big part of my journey, is like reconnecting with my voice and unlocking my voice, and not just when it comes to singing, but with just speaking and like clear self-expression and being in my most authentic expression of self and of my experience, and finding safety in that. That's a common thread that I see in survivors of sexual assault, is like a lot of trouble with self-expression and like not quite understanding why or where it's coming from. So those are a couple of the main things that I work with people on now in reclaiming. And in addition to that, an opening of the creative channel, a reconnection with our creative energy and our life force. And lastly, a reclaiming of our sexual energy and the power that lies in the essence of sexual energy, and working with the shame and the reconditioning of all of the messaging that we have received from society to keep us out of our sexual power, whether or not we have experienced sexual trauma. So those are kind of the four main pieces that have been the biggest for me, that I continue to work on reclaiming, and help others with as well.
Yeah. It's so beautiful and so powerful to recognize the ability that we have to not only touch into these things and utilize the body as an intelligent, energetic system to heal and clear these things for ourselves, but then the really true depth to the medicine that turns into for others. And just even naming here for anyone listening, not even somebody who resonates with this story, that so much of like you hear so much inside of the personal development or spiritual or even just online space of like this ideology of stepping into your most liberated self or your most expressed self or your highest timeline, right? And like what that truly is actually having I don't even just want to say capacity, because I think capacity is built through the journey, but the intention and the willingness and the resiliency and also the support to take a look at any of those things inside of your own body that are keeping you from being able to have that full flowing of what we're talking about here is life force energy throughout your entire system. And I resonate so much with, I feel like so many aha moments are going to come online for me, because where your memory you said was about 4 years ago, mine is just about 2 years, a little over 2 years ago now. And so many parts and pieces of my life started falling into place once I started connecting back to the ways those imprints like really did take my voice. Like as a kid, I was really shy. I was really timid. I had a hard time telling anyone anything difficult. I was really secretive. Anytime I had to tell somebody anything that I thought they were going to like disagree with or be mad at me for, I'd have to write it. I literally couldn't get words to come out of my mouth. And now to just put so much emphasis on the reality that while I didn't know that this was going to be a part of my healing journey until I dove in, right? It came for me on the other side of already starting to work with my body and somatics and things like that. There's so much beauty that's come out of that pain. Like something I said in the beginning of this podcast, I like pride myself on being like really self-expressed and an eloquent speaker. And that's such a real truth of who I am in my essence. But for so much of my life, I would have identified as somebody who had no passion and couldn't speak and didn't know how to express myself. And I was just like this shell of a person who was so ready to just be whatever it was that I was supposed to be versus the growth that happens into the truth of who you came here to be when you allow yourself to go through these experiences.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I resonate with that deeply.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said some of the like common ways that we as women, and it's not just affecting women, but the common imprints that this creates. And my prayer around this podcast is really to not just bring awareness, but bring kind of like validation and a place for women to land who are navigating these experiences, because I do find specifically when it comes to a repression of a memory, you talked about that like disorientation that happens. So I'm curious for you, sort of, you spoke to your story and what came up, and I also just like so much love and kindness and softness and also gratitude for you being as strong as you are to be able to speak those things out loud and adding that extra piece to your story that I didn't even know. But how has that disorientation sort of showed itself in your day-to-day life? Like how is that played out for you?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll definitely speak to that. And something else is coming to me too that feels important to mention for people who might be experiencing something that they don't understand. And I guess that's actually a perfect lead into how the disorientation felt for me is like I was experiencing so many things before this remembering that I didn't understand. And so I would love to speak to and explain a little bit around how the body is affected by sexual trauma and kind of the way that it holds it and the way that it might begin to show itself as it's ready to begin processing. Because that can be so confusing if we don't have like a conceptual idea of what is going on with our bodies. For me, after I had my daughter, and this was years before my remembering, I experienced really severe postpartum depression. And I started to have all of these emotions come up. It was like kind of this like dam unclogging of like all of these repressed emotions that made no sense to me. And the further along I got in my healing, I began to connect the dots that like all of this repressed anger and all of this repressed grief, that moment was an opening for that to begin coming through. And I had no idea where it was coming from. And it felt so scary to me. It felt out of control. I felt crazy. I felt scared, and I ended up getting on antidepressants. This was before I had awareness. This was before I was like consciously on the path. Like my soul was very on the path, but I still was in a lot of like disarray mentally. And so that's one thing that you might be experiencing is emotions coming that seem kind of like out of nowhere and like with a lot of like force behind them, and they're just trying to be expressed, and they kind of come out at times that don't really make sense. And this is something that you might be experiencing that I experienced. The second thing is feeling a lot of like physical pain in specifically like the lower abdomen. And this is something that women have expressed to me even before I knew what had happened to me. All of these women were put in my path that were sharing that knew that they had experienced sexual assault and had been trying to heal from it and had been going more of like the westernized route and seeing doctors and seeing gynecologists and explaining like I'm having this pain and I think it's related to this, but I don't know why, and like why am I feeling this way? And so I feel like it's really important to presence too. I assume that probably people who are listening to your podcast are familiar with somatics to some extent, but the body holds a somatic imprint of any trauma that you experience. But specifically with sexual assault, there's like a very specific contraction and a way that the body goes into um, self-protection and like a very specific shape that the body takes in that moment to protect itself and do everything that it can to either fight off the perpetrator or to not feel what's happening if it gets to a point where the body recognizes like, okay, I can't get away from this experience, but there are other things I can do to not feel it. And when these things start to come up and are ready to be felt and processed, what you might experience is the body beginning to re-experience the pain or kind of going into these like shapes or contractions that you don't understand. And that can feel like a lot of different things, but really like the common thread is like kind of a tightness. And you might feel your heartbeat starting to accelerate. You might start to feel anxious. You might start sweating. You might experience trauma responses and just feel like I'm sitting in my room reading a book. Like, why am I feeling all of this intensity in my body? And there might be emotions alongside of that. And so those are kind of the main couple of things that come to mind to share, to bring awareness to that you might experience if your body is trying to process something that has been repressed.
Yeah, resonates so deeply. Even as I sit here and I listen to you and we're deeping into the conversation, I can feel the pain patterns in my body start to light up. And you're talking about the contraction, and I feel that in my solar plexus start to begin. And that is a really, I remember for me, actually, this is bringing online when I first started deepening into my spiritual awakening. When I would go really deep into meditation, those sorts of things would happen. Like my body would get so tense and shake and like contort. And I it's so interesting because I feel like I always knew on a soul level, like, oh, this is just my body processing energy. And I didn't cognitively know what it was. But then on a human level, I'm like, what is wrong with me? And I'm seeking for answers. And has anybody else experienced this? I remember even like putting it out on social media once, and it was just like crickets of like, does anybody else experience these sorts of things happening in their body when they go really deep into a meditative experience? And yeah, just landing here that really, really resonates, and that it is such a unique thing to navigate. And what else was coming online when you were talking about this is like healing from sexual trauma has to be a somatic and a spiritual experience. Like there is actually no way around that, because when these things happen to our physical bodies, the parts of our soul and our psyche are fragmenting off and like literally leaving the body and don't feel safe to be in here. And what I recognize now is for me, ayahuasca like kind of dropped me into my body for the first time. And I touched into my first ever memory of my birth story, and that was more so what I was navigating inside of there. But recognizing that from there, I just resonate so much with your story. For about 6 months from that experience, I was like, oh my God, I've totally ruined my life, because I'm just crying and purging and none of these emotions are making any sense. I have no idea where this is coming from, like what is happening to me, while simultaneously, like I said, having that little like soul knowing of like, I know exactly what's happening here. I know exactly not what's about to unfold, because it was about 6 months of that before my memory came to the surface. But yeah, just feeling really, really resonate with that part of your story, and the confusion and disorientation that that can create of like, what is wrong with me and what is happening to me, because there isn't a lot of information about this, and a lot of the Western ways of dealing with any sort of mental health, but with things like this, is just you'd be written off to either being like a chronic pain patient or a chronic psych patient and being given meds, and like that's not actually giving any spaciousness for the reality of the depth of healing that can only come through somatics and through like beginning to understand and navigate your consciousness in the ways that we're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to say too, like, it is so possible to heal from this. It is a layered cycle and it's not a quick process, and also it's so possible. And so if you are feeling like hopeless or lost, or like maybe you have dove into healing around this but you're still experiencing things that feel kind of frustrating, like, why is this still happening? Will this ever end? I don't know if there's an ending point, but there comes a point where you shift from victim into empowerment. And I've gone through a lot of layers of that. I'm actually in a deep layer of that right now, of meeting parts of myself that I recognized I've still been in avoidance of, because it can be so painful to like just come to terms with the truth, and come to terms with the truth of what you experienced, because the more deeply you come into awareness, the more pain that is there for you to feel and really witness and hold, or allow others to hold you in. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to say, like, it's possible. I've been doing it. So many people are doing it, and um, there is so much hope to be held for your recovery if these are things that you're experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. I can vouch for that as well. And a frustration that I come up against is exactly that, the like, why are these things still happening, or why does this still feel difficult? And again, it's like this continuous reconciliation with parts of my psyche that I recognize are just trying to protect me from pain. But that does get easier, right? Like, it's like the deeper you go, the wider your capacity becomes. And really also just naming here the importance of seeking support. Like, that's such a big why behind us even having this conversation as well. Because we're not meant to go through these things all alone. And like, especially something like this, it's like it happens relationally, it happens between human beings. So another thing that I have recognized inside of my own experience is a wanting to like isolate and like do it all by myself, and I've got this, and like nobody else needs to like be in this with me. And the more I've allowed other people to kind of like infiltrate into my healing experience, the more I've healed that mistrust that was created for me around being vulnerable with other people and letting myself be seen and letting myself be expressed in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. The first thing that I always teach with people is how to deeply connect with your intuition.
Mm.
Because for me, like, that was the starting point of having an anchor, like enough of an anchor for this to even open into my awareness. Um, and sexual assault can deeply affect our ability to trust ourselves. So that's the first thing that I work with people on, is how to really deeply connect with your intuition so that you are able to navigate and use your discernment around what you need and when in your recovery journey, because each of us are completely different. And while there are threads of things that can help all of us at different points of time, it's not always going to be the same thing at the same time, in the same order, in the same way. So that's something that I would encourage as well, just like with you speaking to allowing yourself to be held by other people. I resonate with that. And also for me, it's been really important and empowering to be able to recognize and discern, like, what does feel better to go into on my own, and what does feel like something that, even if it's edgy, that I'm supposed to ask to be held in. And even down to different healing modalities and practitioners and ceremonies or plant medicine, like any of these things that are available to us, just really encouraging you guys to use your discernment and follow your intuition on what to do and when, and trusting that above like all else.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fortunately, and also, I mean, unfortunately, and somewhat fortunately, because it teaches us such a level of discernment and brings us back to that self-trust, is that there is no like, here's your protocol, like we've been conditioned to seek inside of more Western modalities of healing, right? Like you just so beautifully said, everybody's experience is so different, and the way that your body unravels and the ways that like the architecture and beauty and magnificence of your psyche has created this internal environment that's protected you from this for so long is going to be so different from the next person. And that's where I love that you brought in the thread of like teaching empowerment and self-empowerment. And I believe coming back to your intuition and trusting in your intuition is such a massive, massive piece of that, because no matter what practitioner you lay with or what modality you were taught, it's like you are always going to be the guiding light inside of yourself towards the things that feel really resonant and feel like this feels true for now, or that feels true for now, or this felt true at one point, but now that door is closed and I'm ready to move into this, and not making any of it like wrong or bad or comparing your journey to another person's, because like you just said, like it's so intricate and it's so nuanced.
Yeah, for sure. And the flip side of that is that we have such commonalities between our experiences that we are healing just in our own different ways at our own pace. Like the way that sexual assault affects the mind, the body, the emotional body, the energy body is pretty similar across the board, no matter what our specific experience is. The effects of it and the way that it's held in the body and the way that it affects the way that we view ourselves and the way that it affects the way that we view the world. Those are common threads that we can find common ground on throughout our healing. And part of why I feel it's so important to speak about what you're experiencing when it feels right to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm curious for you. I know you named a couple of those things sort of more in the body way, like how things can show up in your body or the purging of emotions. I'm curious for you how you might have noticed this show up even throughout your healing. So what I'm thinking of is like throughout my healing, I've recognized the way that this shows up for me relationally in my life, and places where I've been really guarded to like letting my heart be opened, or even being able to like accept love into my life, and then endlessly seeking for love that I'm blocking myself from receiving because it doesn't feel safe to receive that. And I think that that's something that humans on a grand scale go through, but I think there's a really particular flavor of guarding your heart when it has been hurt by something that is so closely related to love. Like we talk about sex as making love, and as we develop into our later years and those two things can become really convoluted, I'm curious for you, any ways that that's shown up in your life, or any ways that you're seeing that that's like common across the board for people who have experienced something like this.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of things that came to mind as you were speaking. The first is when you think about being assaulted, especially this type of assault, like your body, your space, your energy is being invaded. And that can really, and the effect of that is us wanting to push away because we're trying to protect ourselves and we're saying, like, get out, get away from me. And that prevents us from being able to receive, just in essence, no matter what we're wanting to receive, whether that's love, whether that's abundance, whether that's any type of receiving. If we still have certain protectors online that are pushing away because they're still living in this memory that feels as if we're still being assaulted, then that makes it actually, I'm not going to say impossible, but like so much harder for us to open to receiving until we can really get in there and process the patterns that our bodies are holding that are keeping us in this like push, get away from me energy. And the second thing that comes to mind is so often the assaults occur by someone who like claims to love us or claims to care about us. And that has honestly been like the hardest thing for me to disentangle, because I deeply connected love with pain and love with abuse. And like my reality and view of what love is and should feel like was so skewed and was so backwards. And so I personally have spent a lot of time working with understanding like the ways that love and pain have been paired, like deeply, deeply seated in my subconscious because of my experiences. And I can imagine that a lot of people experience something similar because of the way that this happens so often with close friends or family members or family friends or teachers or coaches, people that we're told we can trust and we should be listening to and we should love and we should respect and all of these things, that that's it's natural to not only feel confused but to like want to push love away and isolate, if we don't understand what's happening. And even if we do, like even if we have the awareness, like I have held this belief and I'm working through disentangling it, it doesn't mean that it won't come up. Like I'm currently in the most safe relationship I think a human could experience, with like the most safe human I could be with, and I still like have all of this stuff coming up that wants to push away.
Really, like just again mirroring back to the reality of how this is so different for everybody, but also so many of the similarities that can show up. And I was hoping we would go here specifically around relationship, because I think something, again, speaking from a woman's perspective, because we're two women having this conversation about women's bodies who have experienced these things. And there's again, a certain flavor of like, we are like, when it comes to sex and love, it's like we're inviting something in that doesn't necessarily feel safe, or that has become really convoluted inside of our psyches. And I believe that my husband, who I've been with now for almost 10 years, like came into my life as that safe relationship so that I could unwind all the convoluted constructs that I had around sex and love. For me, it was very connected to like manipulation and coercion, and this feeling of like I have to do things that I don't want to do or I won't receive love. And then recognizing as I've moved through my healing journey, the way that that kept showing up inside of relationship, of like how I kept landing myself in spaces where I felt like I had to do something or be something other than myself, or I was going to have love taken away from me, right? And the way that that has shown up inside of this really beautiful, safe and loving relationship is me going through periods of confusion where I'm like, I don't think we're in love, because we're not fighting and it's not chaotic and it's not intense and it's not this like very like heightened nervous system state inside of this relationship, which is something that I recognize now through my healing was like a high for me and almost like a numbing mechanism for everything that I wasn't able to see inside of myself. Now in this very like safe and steady place, it's like the safety doesn't feel safe because my body felt so safe in unsafety for so long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can relate to that too. And I was just speaking with someone that I was in a session with yesterday. I was being supported by someone, and we were working with the way that my system still is acclimating to finding safety in holding the energy of life force and holding the energy of pleasure, and like really allowing myself to open to that and allowing it to move through my system, because pain was such the norm for so long is one piece of it, that like actual love and these higher vibratory frequencies and experiences, as we rid our bodies of these lower vibrations, can be perceived as a threat by our system, because it can feel very similar to a trauma response. like the heightened state of being in pleasure, or the heightened state of just being like in a very open space of vitality, can really mimic the way that the body responds when it's under stress. And so that can be really confusing and like triggering, and it has been a deep process of mine that I'm still working with. But the other piece of that too is that pain. Let's see, I lost the thread. It was a good one. Yeah, I think like right in this moment, just to speak this out, like I'm dissociating a bit.
Yeah.
Because I feel the intensity in my body,
Uh-huh.
and that's what made me lose my train of thought.
Yeah.
So in these moments, guys, like having compassion for yourself and just speaking out like what you're feeling, and presencing, which like we spoke to with speaking can be like a practice, especially if we were raised in an abusive situation.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of power in just like being patient with yourself. And I don't know what the thought was. It was around pain. What did you say right before I went into that? Do you remember?
I'm not sure, but I want to bring it just in this direction for a moment, as you just named the reality of the disassociation that still happens in a very real, regular, normal, everyday human moment, because you named it. And I was like, oh, yeah, same. Like I'm also a little out of body. I noticed, like, for me, my energy ends up being up here. And that's why I also can't get back to that same thread. And I think it's actually a really beautiful thing to have happen within the context of this conversation, because obviously no matter how much healing you do and how safe we do feel in talking about this stuff, the body often is still speaking a bit of a different story, and it still will have these reactions. And I guess that's kind of what I was coming to when I was asking you about how this shows up for you in your life or in relationship, because I also want to normalize something that one of my very first teachers, mentors, somatic therapist said to me, and she was actually the one who held me through the beginning stages. Like, this memory came online as we were working together, is that like there are no amputations, and getting really deep into accepting like there is so much healing that can happen, and I feel so much freer and more alive and more connected inside of my body, and getting past the point where you feel like there is anything wrong with you because you still have these moments of disassociation, or I don't even want to call them symptoms, but just like parts and pieces of how your body is wired to respond and react in certain situations, that I do believe there is like a full circle healing that absolutely can happen in time, but also normalizing, like, you've been in this for 4 years, I've been in this for 2.5 years, and that it's like, that's okay, that still happens, and not trying to rush through to any end goal of feeling like I'll be completely healed when, or I'm still broken until, but just finding such a depth of acceptance of the way that your mind and body do react and respond when you're in a heightened state.
Yeah. Do you have any like simple practices that you want to share with listeners? And like when that happens, how do you bring yourself back into your body?
Yeah. For me, a really great resource is, and you might even actually, now that I'm going to name this, if you're somebody who watches the podcast, you might notice it happening. For me, a big thing is like resourcing around my room. Like, I'll move my eyes around quite a bit of like, okay, there's these 4 walls. I like presencing into where I physically am in reality right now. And then from that place, coming into like some deep breaths, and tapping is a really big one for me too, like specifically on the lower half of my body. Just bringing gentle bilateral tapping to my thighs is something that I can feel bring my energy back down into like, okay, my nervous system is safe and I can land back here. Yeah.
I'm assuming that since we're feeling this energy, listeners might also be feeling a bit activated. Do you want to walk us through like just a brief little grounding exercise?
Sure. Yeah, actually, that would be beautiful. We knew that God was going to bring this in whatever direction it was meant to go in. So if you are listening and you do have the space, I know this goes without saying, but if you are driving, keep your eyes open. Something that works really well for me when I'm trying to presence back into my body is actually placing both of my hands somewhere on my body. Chest is really great for me, but sometimes belly, thighs, like whatever feels safe for you, or even bringing your hands together and feeling the touch of your own hands. And closing down your eyes if that does feel good for you, or just lowering your gaze. And just beginning to notice your breath. There doesn't have to be any push or force or effort to change anything, and just acknowledge any response or reaction that is active inside of your body. Like for me right now, I feel a lot of energy in my shoulders and behind my eyes and above my head, and a lot less energy in my lower half. And that can feel nerve-wracking, right? Like I feel a bit of nervousness. So just noticing what's alive for you. And then from that place, starting to deepen the breath, pulling more air down into the lower half of your body, and using your exhales, maybe audibly or not forcefully, but like blowing air out, really taking control over your inhale and your exhale, and recognizing this mechanism you have in your body to immediately create a shift in your energetic state. And as that begins to work its magic, inviting you to bring your awareness down to the lower half of your body, maybe your feet on your floor or your seat, where your body's connected to the seat beneath you. For me, bringing in sometimes a gentle rocking or swaying motion can be really supportive in this as well. And letting what is be without any push or force or need for anything to change, while simultaneously recognizing your breath melting away, melting down, bringing back in your energy. And if just having your hands resting on your body isn't enough, like I said, bilateral tapping has been a game changer, a lifesaver for my nervous system. So just bringing gentle taps, tapping opposite thighs. You can do this on your belly, just so you guys can see me. You can do it on your chest. Sometimes I do it on my jaw. And this bilateral motion just brings like an instantaneous physiological communication to your nervous system that it is safe. Just being with that for a moment, breathing, dropping back down, taking as much time or space as you feel you need. And only when you feel ready, gently opening your eyes and landing back here. Ooh.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wow. It feels really beautiful for that, just to have that land inside of this conversation, right? Like we never know, we don't have control, which is another thing I was thinking about as you were speaking, in allowing life force and pleasure to move through your body requires a slow titration of systematically actually letting go of that control that we're holding in our bodies around the pain and around the tension and around the different emotions, right? Which speaks so loudly to the reality that like you can only feel as much pleasure and joy and connection and creation as you can allow yourself to feel pain and fear and contraction inside of your system.
Yeah, absolutely. And even now that I'm in a more regulated state, the thought's completely gone. And so I'm just going to trust that it wasn't meant to be here.
Or that it'll pop back up exactly when it's supposed to.
Exactly.
Yeah. So with all of that, I mean, we just went through a little bit of a practice, right? I would love to hear from you what, keeping into consideration for all of the listeners that, like we said, there is no protocol, there is no exact framework, but what are some of the practices, maybe even practitioners, like things that the listeners could explore for themselves to help them in being that self-healer inside of this journey that have been really useful for you?
Yeah. My number one resource and modality that I practice now, I feel like I have awareness of being in this to some extent at like every single moment of the day for the most part. And it's a practice of a technique called deep brain reorienting. Um, did you ever work with Carmen in Costa Rica?
Yeah, I haven't gone to Costa Rica, but when my memory first came up and I reached out to you, you had suggested her, and I did a couple of experiences with her virtually.
Yeah. So she was the one who taught me about DBR, and it's something that I have like completely taken and run with. And it's something that right now I'm creating a course to support survivors of sexual assault in their own recovery, with like a self-paced course that also will have guidance and support like available as needed. But the number one tool that I'm teaching inside of that course is this modality. And it has helped me so much because it's given me agency over, first of all, it's given me understanding around like how the brain works and how trauma and contraction is stored in the brain and how that is connected to the somatic imprints that are still living in the body. And it's also given me agency over like this is something that's safe to practice on your own, that is completely, you're trusting the intelligence of your body. And it's really a practice of allowing yourself to follow your body and to, it's kind of done in like a meditative state. And what you do is find the contraction in your brain. And that just kind of feels like a tightness because, well, I have many things to share, but I'll finish this train of thought and then come back to the way that memories are stored in the brain at a moment of trauma. But when you're practicing it, all you really need to do is like, first of all, maintain awareness of the present moment, because that's always the goal, is to reorient ourselves in the present moment and to bring these parts of self that are still living in a memory and kind of stuck in an experience, bringing them to this present moment and allowing for the body to simultaneously kind of work through the kinks that it's holding around these memories. And so it's a practice of meditating on different places in the brain that are holding this contraction of these memories. And really, it's a contraction of consciousness and allowing for the body to just respond. Like once we put our awareness on these places in the brain, it's really amazing how the intelligence of the body, if we can learn how to follow and surrender, know exactly what to do. And the hardest part, honestly, is just like the learning to completely let go, because a lot of times trauma responses can come up. And in my experience, it's more of like a muted experience. It's not like a full blown, like you're experiencing the level of intensity that you were at the time of this memory. It's more of like you're experiencing probably like 20% intensity. So you can track what's going on, but you can also really stay present and grounded. But it's a practice to like surrender, and there's emotions involved, and all of these things come through. And it has really been like the number one game changer for me, because really, like, however often you're dedicated to doing this practice, like the quicker your recovery will go.
Mm.
And not that like speed is or should be the goal, but for me, I've been very motivated to like get myself out of these states that feel very like inhibited from being able to show up in the world in the way that I truly desire to show up and know that I'm capable of showing up in. So that's one of the things that I love to teach and something that I use every single day.
Yeah, beautiful. And I feel like that's a less common one, and you're even inspiring me. I'm like, maybe we need to do a session to refresh my memory, because it's something I remember learning and doing in the beginning, but in the very beginning stages where I was also still dealing with some I want to say like denial, and like went in and out of phases of like, oh my God, I really have to tackle like being devoted to this healing, and actually like got it, saw it, I'm done with that. And like I went through a lot of processes around that. So normalizing that as well, right? The time it takes you to actually lean into the depth of healing and the devotion to whatever modalities are going to be the thing that really helps you. And then from there, I'm just so interested. Like for me, there are so many gifts that have come out of this experience for me, but one of the biggest ones is just like the depth of passion I have for learning and understanding about the brain and the body connection and neuroscience and your nervous system, and how trauma and energy like weave and move through the body. I mean, it's something you and I both seem to be devoting our lives to doing so that we can help other people with these things. You spoke about talking about how memory gets stored in the brain at the time of trauma. And I think that'd be really powerful for the listeners to receive.
Yeah. I geek out over this too. I get so excited because it gives us the power to heal ourselves, which is incredible to be able to, when we're taught so often by society that we need to look outward for answers and need to rely on something outside of ourselves in order to like feel a specific type of way. This is something that gives us the ability to like really put our healing in our own hands. And like you said, it's just one of many modalities that are available, and definitely follow what feels the most resonant for you and the timing of what you feel called to. But yeah, with this modality, so there's something that's called the orienting response. And what happens is, and this is not just limited to sexual trauma, this is any time that the body experiences something that is creating a contraction of the system, an experience that feels too overwhelming for the system to be able to process. So the orienting response, what happens at the time of, say you're in like a car accident. At the time of the car accident, the orienting response basically takes like a snapshot of whatever exact position you were in at the time of impact in this specific example. Yeah, I see that. You're feeling a lot with that. So say that at the time of impact, my head was turned to the right and I closed my eyes and I kind of like took this self-protective shape. The orienting response then creates this, there's a contraction in the brain where this exact snapshot is being held. So if you think of it, like I kind of think of it like a filing cabinet, and there's all of these like snapshots, and the brain knows exactly the right order in which to revisit things so that the system can uncontract in the way that's exactly right for you. So when you're doing DBR, it doesn't really work. I mean, you can try to have specific intentions. That's not the way that I approach it. I just fully surrender to whatever I'm feeling in my brain at the time. And it hasn't just been sexual assault. It's been like anything that's ever happened in my life that has created contraction. This can be beliefs. This can be something that like made me feel embarrassed or scared that my body was still holding on to in some capacity. And it also has been these like more deep traumas that it's been holding as well. And so when you go into DBR and you're focusing on these parts of your brain where you just feel this tightness, what happens is the intelligence of the brain and the body start to reorient themselves back to this exact moment. And so if you are allowing yourself to really follow your body and coming into this meditative state in the correct way, then you will notice that, like in this specific example, that your body, your head will start to turn to the right, and your body will start to take on this protective stance, and your eyes will squint shut, and you stay with that until your body naturally reorients itself to the present moment, and you'll feel yourself come out of it. And normally there will be some sort of like yawn or release of some sort. And that's how you know that the system has like fully processed through that memory. And there will be like a moment of pause where you can choose to go back in and continue processing, or you can go about your day because you've gotten to a point where something has been fully processed and you're not like in the throes of that memory.
Wow. That is so fascinating. Even as you were like being somebody who's so energetically sensitive, you saw me start to get like, oh yeah, I feel that. Like I feel what you're talking about. And then even as you went through that process of like holding that and then letting it go, I felt in my own body this like, oh wow, yeah. Like just the truth and the resonance of the intelligence, like the sheer intelligence of the beauty of our bodies and how they are these self-healing mechanisms that when we have the support and education that is so deeply starting to come literally online everywhere we look right now, how powerful it can be to step into that empowerment and be able to self-heal. Like just so beautiful. And I appreciate you bringing that modality forward because it's so different from a lot of what you do hear about, which is like different other somatic techniques or breath work or psychedelics, where like this is something that is I'm sure it takes some time to learn and get used to and be sort of guided through, but then once you get the hang of it, like sounds so deeply powerful. And I also love a practice that's really rooted and oriented into how we can like track the science that's connected to it, right? So thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use it all the time, and I find that it translates really beautifully into other settings as well. Like if you are in a different type of healing session, or a ceremony, or like a yoga practice, like whatever it might be, you can always bring that forward as a tool in a moment where you're feeling intensity, and bring your brain into it and allow it to help you process in different settings and situations, especially like plant medicine. It's really really supportive to know how to get yourself out of a contracted state if you're in like more of a psychedelic space. So yeah, it's useful for so many things.
Yeah, absolutely. Curious for you, in your experience, do you find that you will see is it like a one and done, that once your body goes into that contraction and it sees it all the way through, that it's like then you're reoriented and then the next time you go in, you're going into a different contraction? Or have you found yourself having to go back to certain contractions like again and again?
It's both in my experience, and it depends on the intensity of the trauma and what the body is holding. So yeah, something that's like more minor, you might just release in 5 minutes and not ever have to revisit. And then something that is like maybe has been experienced chronically. Like for me, I experienced multiple assaults that were very similar. So I have gone in and processed memories or contractions that have felt really similar to allow to process through again and again and again and again, because I experienced something more and more times, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so
So
much for sharing that. And we'll definitely, I have just like a couple more questions, but we'll definitely seed that at the end, just the way that anybody that's listening, whether you're moving through sexual trauma or anything, right? Like these modalities aren't, like you said, just for that, but it sounds like just such a powerful one to put in your toolbox to learn to become even more deeply empowered in the reality that you are in the driver's seat of your own healing process. We've talked a lot about the depths of how this can show up in your psyche, how it can show up in your body, what healing can look like. And there's been a lot of it's beauty, but it's also heaviness, right? So I would love for you to take a few moments and speak into the gifts and the healing that happens on the other side, and some of the beauty that you're experiencing in your life by being so devoted by to going in and healing in this way. Like, what are some of the things that the listeners can, although it's nuanced and different for everybody, but look forward to like seeing on the other side?
Yeah. Joy. I feel like you said, the deeper you're able to dive into the depths, the higher of an experience you're able to create for yourself, and the capacity to experience that as well. It's really given me my life back. And that's why I feel so passionate about it. And about teaching it and speaking about it and helping other people navigate it, because experiencing this like takes so much from you. And that is a reality. Like, that's not a victimized mentality statement. Like, it takes so much from you. And diving into the healing of it, having the courage to really like go to those places that feel so scary to revisit and so scary to open your awareness to, give you the ability to free yourself, to receive love, to free yourself to experience sensation, and really like unnumb yourself, to experience joy and connection in relationship. I've experienced so much deeper connection even with my kids. I have 2 kids. We haven't really talked about that much, but I've been able to show up as a more clear, present, connected mother, which is actually was the driving force behind why I've been able to go to the depths that I have, because I recognized when my daughter was born, like I kind of felt this disconnection that I didn't understand. And that's really when I started asking questions about like, why am I the way that I am? Like, I don't want to feel this way. This doesn't feel right. And so it gives us the ability to connect and to receive love and to give love and to feel vitality and aliveness. It gives us our body back, or able to like physically do things that we weren't able to do before. And just so much more like enjoyment and richness and possibility available to us in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I can second that notion. And I will admit that I am still in such depths of healing through this. Like, there's been so much beauty and so much empowerment, and I believe that it's an ongoing journey. But something I will add is that like I didn't even know how much was taken from me until I went into the healing and realized how much life I wasn't living, or how much I wasn't feeling, or how disconnected I really felt from my body and from my pleasure and from love and from connection. And only in hindsight do I see that like hungry ghost, constantly searching, constantly seeking, constantly needing to feel like I needed to get filled up on something outside of me, was actually coming from this place of not filling my body with more of my soul and my spirit and my truth. And I think sometimes it can be really easy in the sea of online influencers and spirituality across the internet to look at people who are speaking into like creating the life that, like being a creator, right? And creating the life that you're really meant for. And I am such a proponent for speaking to what it actually takes to really get there. Like having such a firm belief that every single person, no matter what you've been through, no matter how hard, how deep, how horrific of a past of trauma you might have embedded in your body, it's like these things that we're talking about here, and your willingness to go into it and to hold yourself and to be held where you need to be held is the exact path to getting to that place where then you fully understand what it means to be a creator and to be in that joy and to be in that pleasure. And it's just only landing more and more and more how powerful and how important and how potent our healing is, and like this movement is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And first and foremost, we heal for ourselves, but the ripple effects of that affect and touch everyone in our life in ways that we probably don't even realize. And beyond that, it's shifting the collective consciousness energetically, and also it's allowing us to step into our power and lead and live in our purpose in a way that we weren't able to before, which the more of us who do that, the more we're able to shift the frequency of this planet and contribute to building the world that all of us want to experience.
So powerful. Thank you so much. Thank you for your bravery and your heart and your voice, and for saying yes to coming on here and having this conversation with me. I can only imagine the ripple effect that it's going to get to create, and that you are going to get to continue to create through your artistry and through everything that you're doing on the healing end of helping more women through these experiences and through these spaces. So I have two final questions I ask everybody that comes on the podcast. First one is, I know that you know how deep and disorienting and confusing and frustrating and sometimes lonely and even hopeless these sorts of healing processes can be. And we can even speak specifically to the texture of this one that we've been talking about today. For anybody listening who is either just beginning to touch into or just beginning to turn towards or has just had this memory come back for them, what bit of advice would you give?
You're not alone. You're not alone, and there's nothing wrong with you. There's no shame in what you have experienced. And this is going to catalyze you more deeply into your power than you could possibly imagine. So you are not a victim. You are a powerful, powerful being. And this is just a piece of your story and a stop on your path that is going to help ultimately so many people.
Thank you so much for receiving that for myself here in this moment, and just feeling extremely, extremely grateful for the ways that the path has weaved to lead you into my life and to lead us to this conversation. Final question, just anything that you have going on in your world for those who are listening, how they can connect with you, how they can work with you, anything you're feeling really excited about platforming here for yourself.
Yeah, I'll just presence my Instagram. It's Kore, Kore sound. And that's where you can stay in the know about anything that I have going on, whether that's new music or projects or healing courses or resources. And that's pretty much like my hub at the moment. I'm really excited about some of the projects that I'm involved with right now from a music aspect. I'm working on a sound healing project with an artist that I'm really excited to be working with, that will be available to listen to at home and can support you in your recovery through the vibration and frequency of sound, which is something that we didn't even touch on today, but that's something that I'm so passionate about. I believe that like the future of healing is sound. And I'm also really excited about a course that I'm in the process of creating right now, like I mentioned earlier, that will help survivors of sexual assault be able to take their healing into their own hands and navigate it at their own pace, with additional support available as needed. So those are the two things that are the most alive for me right now.
Amazing. And we will drop all of Kore's links down into the show notes so that you can get in touch very, very easily. Thank you so much. Like, truly, truly, it is always such a gift to have these conversations. Like I say all the time, a part of the reason I created this podcast is just because one of my favorite things to do is geek out about these things and about empowering others to get in touch with the teachers and healers and modalities and practices and conversations that are going to be even just that like one little spark they need to change course or deepen into a certain direction inside of their lives. So I appreciate you so much for the voice that you are in this space, and also just feeling like a bit of a guide and mentor for me as I find my voice and more deeply sharing about this and more deeply sharing about the why in all the healing that I do and all the healing that I'm offering, because it really is, like you said, for us first. And I think being able to truly express the depth of the liberation that we've gotten through choosing this way of being is such an important piece to continuously connect back to for the potency of our medicine to really be felt. So I see you and I honor you and I appreciate you so deeply. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I love you.
And for all of the listeners out there, thank you, as always, for being here, for receiving this, for seeing us in some really, really vulnerable places. As always, if you haven't, please subscribe, rate, leave a review, share this podcast with someone you may know needs it, because it is all of you out there, the listeners, the community that is beginning to surround itself in this show, that help it to grow and reach the ears of more listeners who might need that spark of inspiration for themselves. So thank you guys. I'll see you on the next episode.